Hi, this is Vicky from the Spellbound Bead Company, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a cute little rainbow motif and then show you some options on how you can use it. You're going to need 7 colours of size 10 seed beads. You're going to need a 10mm jump ring. Now when we supply the jump rings, they are open like this. So what you need to do is make sure that when you close it using your pliers, you make sure that the join is nice and tightly closed, because that way it'll help to stop the thread slipping through the ring. You can put a drop of either clear nail varnish or PVA glue on there as well to seal it if that's what you'd like to do, just to be a bit more secure. I'm using a size 10 beading needle and I'm using some ash Nymo D. So this is a good sort of blend into the background colour, so it's not going to be obvious. Because of how many colours we're using in this design, it's difficult to pick one that would work all the way through, because if you use the red, because the only place you're going to see the thread is on this outside edge here, but if you used red thread all the way through, it would be quite obvious in the middle here, and it can also affect the colour of the other beads that you're using. So choose a nice neutral, so ash or champagne or sterling, something like that, something that's not going to show. So I've got about 1.5 meters of thread, and to get started what we're going to do is we're going to tie the thread around the jump ring. So leave yourself a reasonable towel, because you're going to need to sew this in. Don't do like I did and leave yourself a tiny little thread to work with, because that is very annoying. So we're just going to tie it on. And there we go. And that's nice and secure to get started. So you see that I've got my colours laid out in sort of reverse rainbow colour here. It's because we're working from the middle of the motif out, and I work from left to right. Obviously you can lay your beads out in an order that suits you, but that's just in case you're wondering why it's back to front. So to start brick stitch, we pick up 2 beads. So 2 beads on the needle. I'm then going to go through the ring there to pull the beads up, and then back up through that second bead that we put on, and they'll sit side by side quite nicely. So the next stitch is just the one. So this is an alternative to the ladder stitch that you do if you weren't working on around a form or around a ring. If you were just doing it freehand, this is where you'd be doing your ladder stitch. But this curve really helps get the rainbow shape that you need. So there we go. That's 4. We're going to put on 9 beads all together here. And these first 2 rows, so the 2 purple rows, we're actually going to work in single brick stitch, and then when we move further out we're going to use 2-drop brick stitch. The shape of the curve just in the middle here is a little bit too tight to get the 2-drop brick stitch looking neat, which is why you're starting off with single. So that's 6. Seven, 8, and there's 9. So that's 9 beads brick stitched to the ring. Okay, so to start the next row, again, because it's brick stitch, we pick up 2 beads to start, and we're going to go under that loop of thread just there. So come through and up, and you want to make sure you pull this reasonably firmly. You want it to be quite tight because you want it to hold its shape. So that's 1. Now we're going to have to put an increase in this row as well. Oops. And you do have to judge this a little bit by eye, but whoops, it's got a loop. There. So that's 2 single stitches, and then in this next one I'll do an increase, which basically means I'll put 2 beads on individually but in the same, under the same thread loop. So there's the first one, and then another bead, and under that same loop again, and there's the second one, and then just pull to make sure it's sitting nicely, and then another single one, and again, and then we'll do 2 stitches in this last space as well, to make sure that the row overhangs slightly. And that'll keep it even at the edge. Whoops, there's a hole in there somewhere, there we go. Okay, so there you can see the first 2 inner rows on the rainbow. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start working in 2 drop brick stitch, which means that we pick up 2 beads and use them as if they were 1. So for the first stitch, as usual, we need to pick up 2 beads. So in this case that's 4, so 2 bead equivalents. Whoops, there we go. And again, we're going to go under that thread there and pull them so that you've got 2 blocks of 2, and then go back up through that second pair, and there's your first stitch, and again pick up 2 under, okay. Now this next stitch needs to be an increase, so 2 stitches in the same gap, there we go. Now if you're using different beads, you might find that you just need to do your increases in slightly different places just to make sure that it fits. You want there to be a nice smooth curve. Seed beads are better for this than cylinder beads, so delicas would be the ones that we would use, because they're rounded, they're not so cylinder, they will actually give you that nice curve, whereas the delicas would tend to be a bit more blocky. There we go, and increase in the next stitch again. So there's one, oops, and a second. There. Just making sure you pull your stitches firm. It's a bit more important when you're working with 2 drop as well, because obviously you need the beads to sit snugly against one another as well. Okay, and then 2 stitches in the last space as before. Whoops. 2. And there we go. There's our next row of rainbow. So, and we're just going to keep repeating the same technique all the way out to the edge. So 2 pairs in the first stitch, and increase. You need to be careful when you're increasing not to stack your increases on top of one another in every row, because this can actually lead to flat spots. So you end up with like a flat edge, so almost like a corner on your rainbow, which is not what we're aiming for. Oops. Okay, that'll be an increase in this one. Okay. So as the rows get progressively longer, you will find that you need to use more beads as you're going along. So you actually only need very few of the purple beads. But, oops, I only put one on there. Right, so to do this, take your needle off your thread and pull it back. Don't try and take your needle back through, because if you catch the thread as you're trying to do that and split it, you can actually end up with a massive great big knot. And if you do that, then to be honest, you're better off just cutting your work up and starting again, because the because Nymo is a multi-filament thread, it can actually felt against itself, and that will make a knot that essentially the more you pull at it, the tighter it gets. So not quite what you're aiming for. So there we go. So one last stitch in this end here. go, and green next. So 4 beads for that first stitch, so 2 and 2 there, and you can really see this, the curve starting to be properly accentuated. Okay, so next row, start with 4 beads. And 2. Now, you can work back and forth across like this if you prefer, but if it's easy for you to continue stitching in the same direction, just turn your work over and then you're working left to right again, or right to left if you prefer. This is up to you which way you find it more comfortable to hold, so it doesn't really matter, because obviously we're not making a pattern of any description. Within the row it doesn't matter whether you work left to right or right to left. So this is an increase in this stitch. As usual, an increase in the last stitch. That's 1 pair and a second. There we go. Okay, so 2 more rows to go. So again, we're just working same as before. Last couple of stitches. Okay, and as always, 2 stitches in this end. This one, and 2, and now as when we finished off the thread end that was short, make sure you finish that last stitch off properly, and there you have your fabulous rainbow. So to finish off your thread ends, you're just going to come down through a couple of pairs of beads, like so, and then we're going to take the needle under the thread in there and make a loop and pull it tight, and then move away. Okay, and under there, and another knot. Just use your thumbnail and get it where you want it to be, and then before you cut, come down through another pair of beads. As we always say, never cut your thread next to a knot, because that way it'll be harder for the knot to come undone. So for this tail here, just take your keeper bead off, put your needle onto the tail end of the thread and finish off the rest of the threads in the same fashion. That's all the thread ends finished off. So here's a few ideas of things you can use your rainbow or rainbows for. The simplest option would be to use a 30mm brooch pin and then attach it to the back of the rainbow, so you can start a new piece of thread and stitch it on using the if you stitch it on and actually go between the beads, so use the threads and connect thread to thread and wrap it around, or you could cheat and use some PVA glue or something like that and glue your brooch pin onto the back. So there's the simplest option for you. So you can do a little bit of embellishing. What I thought might be nice was, I've got some faceted drops here, and I've just added a seed bead in the different colours on either side, and I thought you could just make it so that it looked like a little raindrop. So you can have them 3 different lengths to drop down. So just cut off there. So we'll make this one a little bit longer, shorter rather, so you're cutting off a little bit more there, and then again there. So oops, just make sure you control the ends of your wire there. So then we can just turn a loop on the end of the head pin. Whoops. So just turn a loop. Oh, that's 2. And there's the third one. There. And you could either attach them directly to the jump ring that's there, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to use another jump ring. This is a 7mm jump ring, might be a little bit big, and attach them onto there, and then on here, just to give it a little bit more movement underneath. So there's that you can do. If you're feeling bold, you can make them into a pair of earrings. So the simplest way to do that would be to open up the loop on the ear wire and just hook it through, she says, under the threads, between the threads on the top of the rainbow. There we go. Now just be aware that attaching it directly like that is going to mean that the rainbow is going to sit face forward while you're wearing it. The other option is to attach a little jump ring, and then the rainbow will sit parallel to the side of your face, so in the same plane as the ear wire. So there's an option for you there. You could get a bit fancy, so we'll leave that one there. You could use an eye pin. If we open up that eye pin, attach that to the top of the rainbow. Appear to have turned into fingers and thumbs. There. And then put a little bead or a coloured facet or something on the top, turn a loop, make a pendant. That's not sitting in the middle because that's not sitting correctly there. Or I think the option that I'm going to go with is actually a slightly different suggestion. So we're going to use a pair of eye pins and we're going to attach them to either side here at about, think about it as being a clock, so find the middle. I'm going to attach those at about 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock, so there's one on that side. I'm going to use this one on this side, like so. Oop. Try again. I have opened that eye pin quite a lot of times, so it had gone a little bit brittle. So just beware as you're doing that. So come through and close that one up. So looks a bit odd at the minute, but stick with me. We're going to add a drop bead onto either side here. Do them one at a time. I need to make my life more difficult. So we're going to trim this down so that it's about 6 to 8 millimeters. And then we're going to turn a loop above that drop there. Oops. And then we'll do the same on this other side. That's what you use it with a pair of flat. Okay, so I'll come in this side. Close that up, and now again you need to make sure these connections are nice and tight. So there's my other drop, that one, and again trim and turn the loop. Okay. And then here we've got an 18-inch chain, and I'm just going to cut this in half. Find the middle. Oops, sorry, a bit noisy. I'm going to through that link, and then we'll just open up these loops we've just turned, and we'll thread one end of the chain onto each side. This one onto that side. Open up this loop, and we'll thread the other end of the chain. Oops. Onto this side. And we would if we'd open the link up far enough. There we go. And there we have ourselves a fabulous rainbow pendant.